Welcome everyone to this latest screening in our ongoing Journalism on Screen series here at the Loft, where we celebrate important and fun, because films can be both, films about journalism and the great journalists and industry professionals whose work I think is really so very, very vital to our society, probably now more than ever. So I always like to salute any working journalists who are in the audience at these screenings, because you deserve it. I love this series. I think it's just great. And reading the big New York Times Sunday edition this morning always makes me realize how lucky we are to have a big paper like the New York Times still being published, so it's great. I would like to thank everyone who makes Journalism on Screen possible. Our sponsors, the New York Times, the Arizona Daily Star, the Daily Wildcat, UATV3, the UA College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, the University of Arizona School of Journalism, and the Arizona Inn, the beautiful Arizona Inn here in Tucson. Today's important and fun journalism film is the 2017 Best Picture Oscar nominee, The Post, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring two up-and-coming screen newcomers, Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, as Katharine Graham and Ben Bradley of The Washington Post. And since it's Oscar weekend coming up next Sunday, I should point out that Meryl Streep is the most Oscar-nominated performer, male or female, in history, with 22 acting nominations, including a nomination for playing Katharine Graham in The Post. I sometimes take Meryl Streep for granted because I feel like if she sneezes, she's going to receive an Oscar nomination. But I also know that that sneeze is going to be the best and most convincing sneeze I have ever heard, and it's probably going to be delivered in a very tricky accent as well. Also, I should just say, I love journalism thrillers. This is an actual thriller, much like our previous Journalism on Screen film, All the President's Men. This film's a great companion to that for obvious reasons. This is about the Washington Post and the Pentagon Papers, and it's surprisingly suspenseful given that you probably know how it's going to end up. But we all know that the boat in Titanic was going to sink, and yet we still all love that. So this is directed by Steven Spielberg, who really knows how to craft a suspenseful thriller. The last time I watched The Post, I was thinking of this as the journalistic version of Spielberg's Jaws, with the Nixon administration as the big scary shark gobbling up swimmers. The analogy breaks down if you think about it too hard, but it's there. So our next Journalism on Screen event, which I just wanted to give a plug to, is happening on Sunday, March 17th at 2 p.m. We're going to be screening the 2018 documentary Witness to Democracy, which is about the 1987 South Korean democracy movement. And we're going to have U of A journalism professor Kim Newton, who's also a photojournalist who is in the film, is going to be here to talk about that, as well as the director of the film, Man Jin Kim. And some folks from the UA's East Asian Studies Department will also be here, and that's going to be great. I don't know if that's it's a Tucson premiere for sure. I don't know, probably an Arizona premiere as well. To introduce our very special guest speaker this afternoon, I would like to introduce another very special person who is a professor of practice, associate director, and director of undergraduate studies in the U of A School of Journalism. She was also someone who spent more than 25 years at the New York Times in various editorial positions. Nancy Sharkey, she's also very key to this whole series. So please welcome Nancy Sharkey.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I'll manage. Thanks, Jeff. So, as Jeff said, we're here today to view a film set at the Washington Post over 2 eventful weeks in June 1971. It centers on the Post's decision to defy the Nixon administration and publish stories based on the Pentagon Papers. It's a story about shining a spotlight on, disinfecting spotlight on government actions, some of them illegal, and protecting freedom of the press. But what you wouldn't know simply from watching the film is the integral role that the New York Times played in the publication of the Pentagon Papers. This story of the papers is largely the Times's. It begins 4 months before this movie is set in March 1971, when Daniel Ellsberg called Neil Sheehan and said he had a story. The papers, the Pentagon papers that he leaked to Sheehan, detail, and I'm talking great detail, 7,000 pages, 47 volumes, how 4 successive presidential administrations became increasingly involved in propping up South Vietnam against communism, how they came to believe it was a losing cause, and how successive administrations lied to the public and to Congress. So that March, with these papers, a team of Times editors and reporters rented a hotel room up on 6th Avenue, the Hilton on 6th Avenue, and began a series of stories that describe what the papers found and excerpted from those papers. The first story runs on June 13th, 1971. President Nixon initially is unconcerned. He's more concerned about that photo at the bottom of that page 1 of the New York Times of his daughter Tricia's wedding in the Rose Garden. It's, in fact, on the White House tapes from that morning, it's the only thing he talks about. But Al Haig, Henry Kissinger, and John Mitchell persuade him that this story needs to be stopped, that the Times should be prosecuted for publishing secret information. A federal appellate court, within 2 days, orders the Times to cease publication. And here, enter the Washington Post. In the film, you'll see the drama of Katharine Graham and Bill Bradley's decision-making. After the film, we'll have a great discussion of the Times' role in the story and fast forward to today, some of the issues we're facing today in maintaining a free press. At the time, the paper's in-house counsel, at the time of the Pentagon papers, the in-house counsel, James Goodall, argued for publication. The Times hired a posh white shoe law firm who argued against, saying they thought the Times would be breaking federal law by publishing. That firm quit. The Times published, and Goodale won. Our guest today has also been an in-house counsel for the Times for more than 30 years, George Freeman. He is a successor to the fight for freedom of the press and for the role of the press in a democratic society. He spent more than 20 years of his tenure as Assistant General Counsel of the Times, and during his tenure, the paper never lost a libel or invasion of privacy suit, and it won key rulings on press freedom. He's now Executive Director of the Media Law Resource Center, which protects free press rights of publishers. He graduated from Amherst, received his law degree with honors from Harvard, and he's the William J. Brennan Visiting Professor of First Amendment Issues at Columbia University. He's also taught media law and ethics at NYU and City University of New York. We're delighted he's with us today to spend time in Tucson to discuss key issues of press freedom. Moderating today is my colleague from the U of A, Bill Schmidt, a professor of journalism. Many of you have seen Bill on the stage before. He retired from the Times as assistant managing editor in 2013, having served as a national and foreign correspondent, and he was part of the Pulitzer Prize winning team that covered the Challenger space shuttle disaster 33 years ago. One more thing. There's been a lot of criticism of this film for underplaying the primary role of the Times in the movie. There's a typical headline by press critic reads, "Sorry, Hollywood, the Post should really be about the New York Times." But one press critic recounted a story I just love. There was an exchange some years ago between the screenwriter John Gregory Dunn and a Hollywood producer. Dunn, in some frustration while finishing the script for another journalism movie, Up Close and Personal, finally asked the producer, "Okay, what do you think this picture is really about?" The Hollywood producer responded, "It's about 2 movie stars." Here then is The Post with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks.